My name is Marcio Fonseca. I'm the president, CEO of GRSL. The ticker is GRSL. We are exploring, drilling, expanding resources at the Plomosas project in Sinaloa, Mexico. We are a silver exploration company with the Plomosas project in Sinaloa, Mexico.
Marcio, good to see you again, sir. You've just raised some money. How easy, how hard was that?
Was a fascinating experience because since I took over and with Eric and myself working in the transformation of the company, very quick we got a response from the bankers saying that they would like to provide us a bought deal. And it was an offer for 12 million Canadian dollars that then ended up with 13.8, which is going to be pretty much fully fund the company for additional drilling, expansion of resources, and the advance of the Plomosas project.
It's a very interesting time for silver. It's been sort of on a quite a good run, and I think Mexico's back in fashion again. Maybe just for people that are new to your story, but also new to silver. The Mexican mining environment at the moment, have things changed much since the elections?
I go to Mexico pretty much every month, and I've been doing business in Mexico for more than 20 years. We have seen many cycles, but recently with the new government, I've seen a more favorable and more positive environment for the development of mining projects. They have some specific projects that they are looking into more detail, and having companies that have permits in some areas like us that we can in the future maybe restart mining or working towards that and work with the communities is becoming more and more relevant. And having said that, of course, there's still some challenges about open pit mining, but for companies that have more underground type of operations, I think it's still an extremely favorable country, considering it's the largest silver producer in the world. You cannot discount that, no? And silver is a very in-demand commodity.
Right, you mentioned one of the kind of key things that's going on. I think in most jurisdictions, open ground, underground, mines each have sort of a different path and find it easier or harder depending on what they are. Your obviously Plomosas is underground, past producing underground. Has that made things or conversations in country a bit easier for you?
It's very clear that the environment is more favorable for underground type of operations. As a matter for you to be granted authorizations and permits or expansions, and the timeline to achieve the environmental permits is more favorable as well.
Okay, so let's maybe remind people what you got. Like it's been a while since we spoke, and I kind of need a kind of refresher myself. So obviously, Plomosas is, like I say, former underground producer. That's the kind of, would you say that's your kind of flagship? San Marcial is.
Yes.
How do you describe the relationship between the two assets?
It's a good point. The Plomosas project is made of two areas. The San Marcial area, where we made a discovery. It's drilling and exploration, but it's more drilling to expand. And the Plomosas area that has the Plomosas underground mine. The Plomosas underground mine is a historic mine. It was mined for 14, 15 years by Grupo Mexico. They shut down in 2001. When silver price was $5 per ounce. We went back and did more work, and we realized that most of the permits, most of them are still valid at the Plomosas mine area, and we are working how to combine these two assets because they are very close by. They are 5 kilometers at a distance. One has the infrastructure. The only thing that we don't have at Plomosas mine area is a plant. The underground mine is built. All the area, the San Marcial, that's 5 kilometers away, we have this discovery that when we hit 100 meters at 300 grams per ton of silver, was a massive, very, very expressive discovery. But that was in 2022, a different silver market. So we came back now after 1 year when we did a lot of restructuring of the financials. We removed a lot of the liabilities that the company had in the past. We are much more, we are healthier now financially. And with the inflow of cash, we are going to work in how to expand the 134 million ounces of silver that we have in the Plomosas project.
Well, let's talk about that. I think the business plans of companies are fascinating in the market. I say 2022 is a very different environment to today, but we're also in a higher silver price environment today, which is great. But you've got to prepare for the future. And so what have you guys learned in the last, say, 5 years about the market, about the asset, and the way that you will sort of come at things now? It kind of feels like companies are changing the way that they approach things. So what are the learnings from you?
Yeah, about the market. Of course, everybody is very bullish about silver. We expect silver to continue to outperform, but there will be some volatility. And we believe that's important to define a project that can really survive through different cycles, because a mine project is probably 7-10 years of mine life. And how we are doing that is to define a silver predominantly resource. That's what the San Marcial area is. It's 85% silver. In a situation where the potential project there can be very attractive for future development, when the margins are going to be really high, because we are dealing with a mineralization, a silver mineralization, that's not narrow. It's 25 meters on average thick. That creates economy of scale. Okay, that's one point. The other point about the asset itself is how to de-risk the assets. First, as I said at the beginning, the strategy to how to combine an area that you have the permits, so you can reduce the timeline for future potential development. The second is how to minimize future capital costs related to development, because if you have an area that you have some infrastructure, you can reduce that when you get the San Marcial area more to the same level as the Plomosas area, the two combined. And working with the engineers as you were working now, and being very diligent how to deploy the capital to drill down deep and down plunge along this big anomaly. I didn't say at the beginning, but the resource that we have at San Marcial is on the edge of a big discovery, a big anomaly that we made an announcement recently in our presentation. I encourage everybody to look. But we have tested only 20% of the edge of the anomaly. And that 20%, we delineated 68 million ounces of silver equivalent. And with not much capital last year, going back how we are working the asset level, we studied and achieved a better understanding of what's controlling the silver mineralization. So now our drill holes have more chance to hit similar type of wide intersections.
Talk to me though about the kind of sequencing here. Obviously, you just raised a lot of money, $13.8 million, right? You'll be asked in everything else that you do about the use of proceeds. I'm kind of more interested in the sequencing of the allocation of that capital and the kind of sequencing of this movement to the kind of development phase. Because we're seeing in the market a lot of companies try and work out how they can get into revenue quicker, which is a new feeling for Canadian companies with whether it be South American assets or not. How are you viewing it, and the people who gave you the money, what were you telling them?
It's a good point. Well, the way we are splitting this use of proceeds is very clear in two ways. One, of course, is the bulk sampling that we are carrying out at the Plomosas mine, the historic mine. What's the bulk sample? Is to take samples, do metallurgical test work, and get the engineering data to give us an idea what kind of plant, as a pilot plant, we can put in place in the next 6 and 9 months. Of course, it's not going to be a super large plant because it is a baby step approach. And then we will deploy the capital if the test work is successful, and put a plant in place and establish the relationships of takers, locals, engineers, and bring that Plomosas area back into some sort of really more revenue stage, as you're saying. The other point is parallel to that, we are going to advance the environmental application for the permit for the San Marcial area, because there is an exploration stage, and we need at some stage to expand tunnels into the deposit, to drill and have more engineering work. And this might take probably 12-15 months to get this all into place and approved. But between now and 12 months, 15 months, we will continue to drill from the surface. Very strategic holes. So likely by next year, we are going to have an updated resource at San Marcial, which combined with what we have at Plomosas in the second half of 2026, we can create an engineering report, which can be named as a PEA. But between now and then, we expect potentially to be in a position that Plomosas mine area can be more recognized as an asset that can bring some sort of revenue to the company.
Right. Okay. Well, and let's maybe explain to people, because I know we've got a company following the same business model. I've got my chart over here, 18 other companies that have decided this is important. The market has said it's important to show nearer term revenue if you can. So maybe explain the kind of the discussions that you've had internally about the problems and the kind of level of control that can give you following this business model.
Of course, like I said before, it's important to realize that when you have an asset that you have most of the permits and what is missing is just minor, you're dealing with situations about how much time is going to be required to bring that into production. Much less. Time costs money, no? And it's an important variable. So you need to take that into account. The second is like, when you look about, we looked at the combination, the synergies of the two areas. They are not far away. They are 5 kilometers. And the infrastructures, most of the infrastructure is already at Plomosas. And I think we thought about, when you define a much larger resource at San Marcial, if you have Plomosas already in some sort of really pilot scale, that can really de-risk the development of the combination. And when you bring the future capex of a project, is much smaller. You might not be dealing with the $200+ million capital cost project. Might be below that or even lower. No? And I'll give an example to the audience here. Plomosas has a power line in place, 60 kilometers of power line, high voltage. If you were going to build that today, how long would it take to get the permit? And how much capital would need to be allocated? No? Plomosas, the mine area, has the water permit, which is a very valuable commodity in Mexico. So that can be enough for both areas. So it's a bit of challenge to quantify, but from an assessment how to have a business plan in place to develop these two combined areas, we are putting all these variables together. No?
Well, yeah, I agree with that. And in terms of those, near-term revenue, get the scale, increase the life of mine. Yeah, it makes sense, but it's very different from the sort of traditional Canadian public market model, and thankfully it's evolving to sort of Australian model, which we like. You mentioned sort of the bulk tonnage component. I mean, where are you with that? What are the kind of barriers to getting that thing across the line, and what's the timeline?
So why we decide to implement the bulk tonnage? Because at the Plomosas mine area, you have 7.4 kilometers of underground tunnels. It's already developed the mine. The potential stopes are already there to be sampled and better understand the grade distribution. We do the phase one. We define 21 areas inside the mine that can be potentially mined or where the material can be accessed. No, because we have the blasting permit. Is another permit is in place. You don't need to apply, and the results came very attractive as the grade, the silver grade and lead and zinc. Just to remind everybody, the Plomosas underground mine was a lead and zinc with silver. That's what, and we sent those samples to some labs to do additional test work to see what level of recoveries we can really achieve, because we need to take into account that in the 1980s and 90s, the technology was different. Today you can recover much more silver and gold from lead and zinc concentrates. That's what we're doing. So this test work is about to finish by October, and we have a second phase going on now with engineers in Mexico and Canadian engineers, putting a study together. What is going to be the flow sheet of this pilot plant? How much is going to cost? And what we need to buy or not to buy? And that goes back to your question before, the use of the funds, no? What you can use on that. And as we do this work, we can really entertain discussions with off-takers and other financiers. and how to work in this.
Can you just on financiers, and you said you were approached to raise some money. Like, I think silver is very, very positive environment at the moment, and I guess that's what bankers do. They look for companies to raise money for, because they make fees, but they will have also had an opinion about what the market is rewarding and what it is valuing, because not all silver companies will be able to raise money because they don't necessarily haven't got much. So what advice, what were the bankers looking for from you to be able to deliver?
My experience on the recent financing and other discussions, I have 2 points here. The first, of course, the capital markets, how they were far more receptive when a company came to them with a potential revenue generated asset. That was clear. If I had only an exploration asset that I was asking for capital just to go drilling, I think the appetite would be completely different. Number 2 is how, after I received that offer for the bought deal, the interest in the company has changed materially, because it became clear with what we are planning to do. And we don't have any offer yet of anything that's official, but the level of due diligence, of interest of takers trying to visit and understand the project and understand what you're trying to do. That is create another completely different environment where we can access future capital as well. So the company is no longer thinking, of course, capital markets is very important, but other source of capital can be very important in the near future to build a business.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think, certainly in Sinaloa, southern Sinaloa, you've got Vizsla and Prime and First Majestic. There's some nice companies which have been well rewarded. What is it that do you think with the plan that you've outlined today that you can be like them, or is this just a case of actually being the best version of yourselves by sticking with what you've got, Plomosas, and obviously the work that you've got to do at San Marcial? What's your ambition like, I guess, is what I'm asking.
The ambition here is to create a much larger company based on the increase in the resource, but also sustained by the potential revenue generated model, that you can have a way to really get a better re-rating in the capital markets, because we've been looking and studying a lot of companies out there which much smaller resource based have a better market cap than GRSL, and they don't have even the permits to go into production. So, and I said, how can you really get value from that? And look at the Plomosas and say, how much capital we need to use at this asset to make the market more aware that we have something that has a lot of value.
It's kind of interesting, because I kind of feel like the last 5 years has been just staying alive, right? For silver companies, it's been a tough ride in the last 5 years. It's obviously recent times it's picked up a bit, but that lesson was, what I always call, like, you got to be in the game to play the game. So here you've now at the point where you've raised some capital. You've kind of described to me what I think is a sort of stepping stone, baby steps you called it, to nearer term production, unlocking the potential at San Marcial. Does that put you in a better position if, say, the markets are cyclical? If the markets do go down again, do you build your company differently? Do you preserve cash? Do you go for scale quickly? Do you hedge? How do you view the business, running of the business side of things?
Our view about how to approach this, I would say, is more strategic planning, right? How to use the capital and to preserve capital and continue to add value to the company. Is, of course, you have a limited cash position now. Today we have close to 14, can be a little bit more in the next couple of weeks, is to allocate some capital for these 2 activities where we can, 1, be in a better position next year that you can generate additional cash, to manage the how to have the payables and the use of proceeds, but be in a position that next year we still can have some money in the bank and continue to show to the market that we are not really only relying in the future on access to the market, but also have some small revenue in a much larger project, much bigger project, confirming that what we've been now presenting to investors, that one area that we have the permits, we actually can start working, you know, and generating some, potentially made some revenue.
Okay, and just I think in terms of like setting my expectations, I guess setting expectations. Anyone watching this, we've seen some headlines which you've got some super high grade silver in there in terms of around the kind of the chip and channel samples, etc. But what's the reality of what you've got? What type of deposit is this?
Two deposits. The Plomosas mine area, that's the underground mine area, is the polymetallic. It's naturally is going to be a lead zinc with silver as a credit. What we have discovered with the bulk sample, all the samples, is that we are getting much higher silver grades in some areas than what was reported in the resource report, the 43-101. Because for investors, the 43-101 is an exercise of all the drill holes. When we look back at the historic production of the Plomosas mine, we have all the records. We realize that they mined 36 million ounces of silver equivalent for 14 years. We have defined 66 with our work, which 64, apologies, with together with the 68 makes the 134 that we have now. The grade that came in the resource report was relatively low for silver, and now going back underground and sampling, we are having a very positive surprise. Some areas are relatively much higher grade, above the 100, 120 grams per ton silver, far higher than what is in the resource model. And combined with the high-grade lead and zinc, the silver equivalent, the goal, the objective is to have a mine that probably can have a production profile, a potential production profile in the future, above the 200 grams per ton silver equivalent, which is highly profitable.
And you mentioned obviously with the bulk sample test mining that the potential pilot or phase 2 pilot plant operation, a pilot plant operation, I should say. Would this be an upgrade of the existing kind of or the historic Grupo Mexico infrastructure, or would you have to build new? I mean, and what's that going to cost you?
Grupo Mexico operation was permitted for 600 tons per day. What we are initially planning now, if the engineering report gives us enough information that's positive, is to look maybe for a pilot plant in the range of 250 tons per day. Okay? But having a permit that's for 600, naturally you can expand that. But as I said at the beginning, there's a baby step to the one-size plant. Now that the site itself has the space to expand, and all the foundations, all the steel structures are in place, so we can really expand if necessary in the future. But the first stage is to look at this 250 tons per day concept. And next year, with the positive results, and if the revenue model is proven to be feasible and viable in a way, we can use even the capital to continue to expand.
And so, just to be clear, would that be built on the ex-Grupo Mexico
Exactly.
asset?
Yeah. The site itself was a Grupo Mexico operation, but today is 100% controlled by GRSL, right?
For sure.
They built the plant in 1986. When they shut down, they took the whole plant away. But all the buildings, all the infrastructure that was supporting the plant, it's still on site. That's why I was referring that the only component that's missing on site is a plant.
Got it. Okay. And then you'd have the ability to, obviously, you would future-proof that for kind of expansion from 250 to whatever number.
That's why this bulk sample program is important, because it's not only about collecting samples from the underground, but also is about bringing engineers, Mexicans and Canadians, to work with us to design what is going to be this pilot plant 250 tons per day, as a flow sheet, as a capital cost, as how it's going to operate.
Right, and just in terms of, obviously that would be processing the kind of polymetallic output from Plomosas. In terms of what would be coming out of San Marcial, it's going to look a little bit different. How do you kind of future-proof against that, and how does that, I guess more importantly, how does it affect your drilling plans, your drill modeling?
Yeah, the first point here is like how to work this application for the permit to build an underground mine at San Marcial, that we can have that in place and say how we can work on a timeline to have an expansion of the whole operation in the future from the 600 tons per day for something much bigger. Because as today, we need to think about this company has 134 million ounces of silver equivalent as a resource inventory. No? And San Marcial itself is 68. Easy to see a sizable silver operation for 7-8 years there underground. But first you need to do the environmental permit and get the approvals, and then make a decision how to work on the expansion of the permits at the Plomosas mine area. It's important to say this because we are not going to apply for brand new permits. We are going to go to the authorities and say we want to have an expansion of something that's already established. So the time and the risk is much lower.
Okay. So I know you only just got the money in, but you will have to start making plans and maybe announcing to the market that kind of the approach on the exploration side, on the drilling side, not exploration, on the drilling side. When will you be able to give us more detail?
I think probably by the end of September. We are finishing the 3,000 meters that was pre-financing. We decided to use our own money to go and do some strategic drill holes as a step out, and they are coming very positive, showing that we have more mineralization outside of the resource. Now, we just closed the finance 1 week ago. I just came back from Mexico to start working the budget, and we are going to start discussing with contractors how we are going to line up additional drilling at San Marcial in the next 12 months. What we have been conveying to the market that our intention is to define 10 to 15,000 meters of drilling at San Marcial for the next 12 months or a little bit beyond to have an updated resource. Why 10 to 15,000 meters? The 68 million ounces that we defined at San Marcial were defined with 18,000 meters of drilling. So we're trying to say how we are going to, in a much more optimized way now, increase the resource. That's what we're going to do next 12 months. And parallel, like I said, is the application for the permit at San Marcial and the bulk sample and organization, I would say more organization of the Plomosas mine area to be ready for revenue type and future expansion. And next year, we put all this together in a report.
Right, because I think we'd be interested in trying to understand the kind of significance of the intrusive related anomaly, and how that potentially affects a kind of larger scale bulk mineable system that you've got there. What do you know? What can you tell us now, pre-drilling and pre-targeting, about what you think is there?
Why San Marcial is very special, in a way. We completed 72 kilometers of ground geophysics in a very extensive area, and we discovered this big anomaly that's on the edge of the resource. In the last 12 months, we put a lot of efforts to understand why we had hit 100 meters at 300 grams per ton of silver on the edge of this anomaly. It's about going back to school to learn to read the rocks and understand that. So while the geologists did an amazing job, we got a partnership with the universities in Mexico and the CODES that's in Tasmania is a center for deposit modeling. We brought them, let's understand. Now we went back in the first 3,000 meters. Let's drill and see where we can find more similar type of intersections. And we are hitting that. But going back to your point about why the anomaly is important, that is a result of a big intrusive. It's a granite rock type, it's a diorite, it's a rock that's intruding a volcanic area and creating a lot of mineralization on the edges. And we only tested 20% of the edge, and we have 80% untested. Of course, you cannot test everything with this capital we have now, but we are going to continue to step out and test new anomalies. And it's a brand new model. It's a completely new geology, which is we can classify as a discovery, which we are really excited about now.
Yeah, because when we were looking at this, we're sort of interested in the kind of those northeast, northwest trending structures, and in terms of their ability to kind of control the mineralization continuity, as it were, and also you've got something going on sort of southeast, sort of a sort of deeper extension, haven't you? You've got these kind of parallel breccia zones going on.
So the anomaly is in the center of the concession, and you have some northwest faults and northeast faults. What we are discovering that where they intersect each other, they are creating really sizable and wide type of silver mineralization. And we have a series of these intersections on the edges of the anomaly. It's not just one. We have multiples. And at the resource area, we have two. And we defined 68 million ounces. Now we are going on each of these intersections and working how to put some drill holes better oriented to potentially hit this type of mineralization.
Yeah, I think, like I said, it'd be interesting to see what you guys, what the plan is to kind of get after that, obviously, because there's that balance between kind of, pure play exploration type drilling and to get that scale, but also deliver against that kind of nearer term revenue component and how that can feed in. Because I think we're looking specifically at the kind of southeast extensions, see these breccia zones, for a kind of like shallow oxide component versus a kind of deeper sulfide feeders, and whether you'd kind of get after that relatively quickly.
Yeah, the drilling today has been very shallow. We have not drilled more than 250 meters below the surface. For underground mine in Mexico, that's shallow. What we are doing now with this drilling that we are doing now, that about to finish 3,000 meters, there'll be some news release coming tomorrow, and it's more like use all the knowledge to reduce the risk of drilling. Of course, there will be always some exploration risk, but our probability to hit more mineralization is higher now. We put all the elements together to where we are going to drill next and how. We picked 3 areas, first in the vicinities of the resource area. As I step out, we are releasing now some results of some new areas, and we are going to do some drilling below the resource as well, down deep and down plunge, to try to expand from the 200 to the 300, 400 meters below the surface, to show that that resource area itself can be expanded as well. Together with new areas, we are going to increase the resource.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think maybe today's not the day, but maybe if you come back on, we can get into how you've been using the geophysical and geochemical data sets along to I guess clarify the drill model and planning and targeting for sure. I think the big question I'd like to have answered, not necessarily today, but once you've kind of got this plan together, is whether you're getting that balance between your drilling for these kind of high grade pods versus a kind of trying to outline a much larger kind of bulk tonnage breccia zone approach, and again how that feeds into the kind of nearer term revenue production.
Okay, we can do that, but in a very summarized way, is like, it's very common in Mexico to have epithermal systems that are 1 meter, 2 meters wide. They can be 400, 500 grams per ton of silver, on average, silver equivalent. Our model is to explore the 20 plus meters wide, 200, 300 grams per ton of silver equivalent. So when you do the composition, the metal content is much higher. So in the future, when you get to the definition of the potential deposit, and the develop at San Marcial, for example, we are going to have much less meters of development to achieve a much higher amount of tonnage of material. Consequently, your cost is lower and your margin is higher, because you're getting more tons of material per meter of development, and the stopes are wider. You don't need to have 5, 6 mine faces. You may have just 1 or 2. And that's proven by the history at the Plomosas. The Plomosas area, which although it's polymetallic, some of the stopes are 40 meters high, 50 meters wide, and 150 meters long. So from a mining perspective, as potential project development, is what we define as economy of scale and cost savings.
Well, I think we'll know more about that when you get the kind of consolidated PEA out. You remind me, what's the kind of goal there in terms of timing on that?
We are at the moment consider that we got to get this bulk sample down and the pilot plant more operating to help to collect data. and get the drilling completed at San Marcial, and put all this together, and that the second half of next year work on a PA.
Excellent.
And between now and then, have an update on the resource at San Marcial with the drilling that we are doing.
Okay, well, Marcio, look, I appreciate the update. I'm glad you've got the money to get after and do what you want to do. Sounds like there's a plan. We better let you get off and do it.
No, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's an exciting time. Of course, silver market is another exciting time for everybody. And having a project of this magnitude and the caliber of the Plomosas project is something very important for us and for these investors to realize that it's not a pure exploration story. We have a lot of value in different types of assets, and we put a team that's really a highly experienced team, mine builders at the board level, people that came from Mag Silver, from Silvercrest, and ex-bankers. Everybody is all together working to make this a much better company.